Prison bosses preparing to house Trump if he's sentenced to jail. Ah, great. Several facilities have been identified that could offer Trump a cell while keeping him safe, they say.
Can you imagine? Sir, they're exonerating you. They consider you to be incompetent, and therefore, because you're incompetent, they're going to exonerate you. I said, I don't want that. Let me be guilty before they do that.
Who gave the go-ahead to execute the search warrant on Mar-a-Lago?
Magistrate judge in the district
Bruce
of the
Reinhardt.
House and the Justice Department, as well as between the Congress and the Justice Department.
Prison officials now plotting to jail Trump if Judge Merchan gives them the go-ahead. If the thumbs up come down during sentencing, they could theoretically take Trump into jail right then and there. You're going to prison. They're not going to say self-surrender at a later date because maybe he'll flee. He could flee the country. This is what they think about with regular, ordinary, non-presidential candidates, non-former president criminals. They might just run if we give them time to self-surrender. Trump, maybe they wouldn't do that. Maybe they would give him some time to self-surrender, but they could theoretically take him in right then and there. So they're plotting on this. They're preparing for it. And this comes as Trump sits down with the probation people to have a conversation with them about what the appropriate sentence is. So the way this ordinarily works is a defendant goes in, they meet with somebody from probation, they complete, various states call them different things, but we call it a pre-sentence report, a PSR, which is an interview between the defendant and the probation officer, the person doing the PSR. And that's supposed to be an independent analysis and assessment for what an appropriate sentence is. And we're going to talk about what some of those factors are and some of the questions that Trump might be asked when he sits there today. But his defense team will also make a recommendation. Their recommendation will be no jail, probation for like 15 minutes. Put him on probation for 15 minutes. Let's call it a day. The judge will say, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're going to probably put him on probation, maybe some sort of extended release conditions like home confinement or some other work release limitations. We'll see where that goes. There's a lot that the judge could do to be creative on that. But the question is, what is the government going to recommend as well? So the defense will come out. They'll say 15 minutes, 6 months probation is perfectly fine. The government might come out. Is Alvin Bragg going to request jail? Is Matthew Colangelo going to say incarcerate this man in the middle of a 2024 election? There would be a lot of bravado if they did that, but they have already come this far. They've already indicted him in 4 different jurisdictions, charged him with 34 felonies, got convictions in what I think is an absolutely rigged trial, has been from the beginning. From the very inception, this case was dead until Biden's prosecutor Matthew Colangelo came over and reinstituted the whole thing. But now they're plotting and Trump is seated for a probation interview. This is happening virtually. The report comes from NBC News. You can see here's what they tell us. Probation interview is today. Trump is going to be seated down there in New York to talk through this, and they'll be in New York. He'll be in wherever he's at, but it's going on virtually. So here's the background. Scheduled for a virtual interview today. It's going to be a probation officer from New York City. He's going to be at his home in Mar-a-Lago, the one that the feds raided. His attorney, Todd Blanche, is going to be with him, and Trump's already been found guilty. Now, the pre-sentencing probation interview will be done over a special virtual network. Special security measures. The interviewer is going to be female. Don't know who it is. Maybe Schmillery Schminton, something. I don't know. According to 2 sources with knowledge of the situation, the call is not expected to be held over Zoom. Trump, of course, the presumptive Republican nominee, convicted last month in a rigged trial. The probation interview is required by the court to give us that independent assessment. This is what the judge is going to look at to say, all right, the defense is biased, the prosecution is biased, so here I have some independent analysis. Merchan, the acting judge, is allowing Trump's defense attorney to be present for this. Former president scheduled to be sentenced on July 11th, just days before the RNC. And there's a big question on this. We remember when we were going through some of the other evidence in this case that when Grab 'em by the Purse tape broke from Access Hollywood back in 2016, there was talk at the RNC to get rid of Trump, to boot him off the ticket. Oh, he's too damaged. Even though the majority of the Republican Party was behind him at the time, or let's say a big plurality, they still said it was justification to get rid of him. And that didn't happen. But now, think about now, it's a felony conviction? 34 felonies? You could imagine people like Mitch McConnell and others, Romney, pushing behind the scenes to try to get something done as they exit the party to prevent him from winning. And they'll just say, well, felony, maybe there's some extenuating circumstances in the rules, or we've seen other states like Washington hint that they might try to maybe remove him after the sentence and the judgment come down. We'll see. So big questions, of course, all lawfare in the middle of the 2024 election by design. Some legal experts noted that holding probation interview over video is unusual, but so is all of this. Having the former president would be unprecedented in a New York probation location would be unprecedented, obviously. Martin Horn, former commissioner, New York City Department of Corrections and Probation, so this is somebody who works there, said it's highly unusual for a pre-sentence investigation interview to be done over Zoom, but acknowledged that an in-person visit by Trump to the probation would be, quote, very disruptive. And there's also other things that happen in criminal cases where they'll do things like, drug test you. Problem with that is the president has a national security concern with his bodily fluids. And we've seen this before in many other stories. When the president travels overseas, for example, he doesn't even poop in their toilets. All right, he does in the toilet, but they collect it. Like they collect all of the DNA because they don't want foreign intelligence agencies to gobble up that poop and then do something with it. So do you think the Secret Service and our national security apparatus is going to be very thrilled with Trump urinating in some cup for probation in New York to see if he's on any drugs or giving a blood sample or any of these things? I don't think so. And that's going to be one of these friction points that I think is going to make it difficult for them to enforce this, because there is a real concern with having Trump have to respond and be tracked with an ankle monitor. Where is he located? So you can just pinpoint him down. Who's in control of that apparatus if they're going to put him on an ankle monitor? Who's going to control that if he is ordered to home confinement? What if he needs to move for some other reason or something like that? Does he have to get permission from the judge in order to do those things? We have competing interests, multiple layers. So they're saying it's over Zoom. Fine. He says, but you can argue that Trump's appearance at the probation officer on the 10th floor where his trial took place would also be very disruptive to probation, unfair to other defendants who don't want to be identified. So in the end, it might be better for the probation officer. So it's not Trump's fault. It's better for you guys. Horn noted that the typical purpose of probation is to obtain information on Trump's social and criminal history, financial resources, mental health, physical addiction, and to assess his living situation. Do you have a home? Do you have a job? Are you employed? Oh, do you have somebody who's taking care of you and looking after you? Do you have somebody in the house to make sure that you have support in the event do you start feeling like you want to use again? Oh, good. You do have a bunch of support. Great. So you mark that in the notes. You send that over to the judge. This guy's in school. This guy's got a job. This guy's, let's say Trump, this guy's been a businessman for 60 years. He's got billion-dollar portfolio, never been charged or convicted of a crime, former president, and has a huge portion, if not the majority of this country at his back currently as he enters into a new national election. So all those are pretty good features. You say, well, yeah, maybe that guy's not somebody we should be putting on probation or putting in custody, but all right, it's Trump after all. This is New York, and we know how demented they are. Now, by contrast, on the opposite side of this, they could come back out and they could say, look at all of these contempt proceedings that Trump has been held in contempt for. He's got multiple in this case. He's got Engeron's case. He's been gagged in multiple cases. He's somebody who's got 3 other pending charges. So maybe he doesn't have prior convictions, but he's got other cases. So this dude's like been running around committing crimes all over this country. And maybe they'll come back and they'll say there's a very high likelihood that he's not going to comply with the law again. He's going to violate this again. And so he's got more money than anybody and he's got a lot of power. So the only thing, Your Honor, that's going to matter to this defendant is jail. It's the only thing that's going to resonate with him to make sure he doesn't steal the election again. Again, it's not about false business records. It's about stealing the election. And they don't want him to do that again. He won in 2016, but not according to them. He rigged it because of the NDA with Stormy. So a former president is facing anywhere from probation. They could put him up in prison up to 4 years. Sounds insane. Some legal experts say he's unlikely to face imprisonment, due to his age, lack of record, and other factors. And because I think it would be way too much to bite off even for them. Duncan Levin, a former prosecutor and turned defense attorney, said the prosecution is likely to ask for jail time. I feel like they will. Now, whether the judge gets it to them or not, I think the prosecution kind of has to ask for jail. This is a stolen election from 2016. This is Donald Trump. They just got done telling us there was a massive conspiracy here. So how could they not ask for jail? They're going to say this is the biggest crime of the century, essentially. It's the biggest crime of 2 centuries. 2 1/3 centuries. We haven't had any presidential prosecutions in 234 years. So this was so important that they had to shatter that precedent in order to do this. So now they're going to turn around and just not ask for jail. They're going to say, oh, probation. Give me a break. They should be asking for 4 years if this is as serious as they thought it was. 4 years for the 4 years that he stole from our country should be their argument, right? Let's see if they do that or not. Or if this was all about something else, which is really just keeping him bogged down, marking him a felon, and taking him off the campaign trail. This is from the federal courts, but here's a background. So this is the type of stuff Trump will be answering when he's there with these people from probation. Family history, community ties, education background, the best schools, Wharton College School of Finance, employment history, president, physical health, outstanding, vigorous, doesn't trip over sandbags, can finish a sentence, full paragraphs, lucid, mental and emotional health. Are you kidding me? The guy's got more energy and more stamina stamina everywhere. Every time we see him, he looks happy. People love him, and he's making America great again. So emotionally, I think he's doing well. Now, to be fair, this one's probably taxing. He's doing well in spite of 4 criminal prosecutions. So history of substance abuse, none. Doesn't drink alcohol or use drugs at all. Financial condition is amazing. Billionaire. What else do you want to know? Multiple properties, best buildings in New York that Tish is trying to steal, so on and so forth. Willingness to accept responsibility for his or her offenses. That one stinks, huh? Because he didn't do anything wrong. So why would Trump ever do that? So during the investigation, probation will interview, this is the other thing, other people. They're also going to get information, substance abuse providers, law enforcement agencies, family members, court dockets, indictments, plea deals, law enforcement agencies, counseling and substance abuse treatment records, financial records, employment records. They can do an entire basically audit and enema of your whole life. And this is also nice attack vector into Trump. They just go now harass everybody and now ask everybody for their opinions, and other people get their opinions, and they go to someone else and they say, well, this is our assessment. So they get to essentially judge what they think is an appropriate penalty for the president, for Trump, from probation. Now, when possible, maybe they'll conduct a home visit. Maybe they'll go visit Mar-a-Lago. I don't know why they'd need to do that. The FBI already raided everything and took pictures of Melania and Barron's bedroom. So do they need to go see anything at all? During the visit, the officer interviews the family and assesses the living conditions, and then they write the report. Now, it's the responsibility of the probation officer assigned to the investigation to assist the court in verifying, interpreting all of the information. So they bundle it up into this big fat report. They give it to the judge then reads it. The pre-sentence report helps the court fashion what they think is the appropriate and the fair sentence. The report is also disclosed to the defense and the prosecutor. They have an opportunity to make objections and so on. Then it all goes to sentencing. Now, the pre-sentence investigation prepare the PSR, and they play an integral role in all this. Courts differ, but basically the judge gets the recommendation. The judge will weigh all 3 of them and then make their decision on this. So what that looks like ultimately is yet to be seen, and I'm not sure that we'll see a copy of the PSR that's going to be sealed, and should be sealed, and something that we don't see because it should be filled with personal information and so on. But who knows? We'll probably get some more information from it because everything leaks out of New York. So that's what we're looking for in this process as Trump sits down to do this interview. We also have a report that they're preparing for jail. So this one came out over from the Mirror. So who knows the truth or the veracity of any of these reports. I've seen a bunch of them. It wouldn't surprise me that they're preparing for this, or at least having conversations about it. But in my mind, I think when they get into the mechanics of it, when they get into the transfer, Secret Service, custody, jurisdiction, making sure it's secure, the disruption to the jail, all those things, I think practically they're not going to be able to do it. Doesn't mean they don't want to do it. Doesn't mean the judge wouldn't do it if he could, but I don't think they practically can. So he'll give him a big lecture, put him on probation, and again, maybe limit him, maybe put him on home confinement or do something like that just for the extra humiliation. But here's the report, just so we're aware this could happen. Prison bosses preparing to house Trump if he's sentenced to jail. Ah, great. Here's what they say. Several facilities have been identified that could offer Trump a cell while keeping him safe, they say. It left U.S. legal commentators after the conviction questioning how this might work. Most high-profile detainees are housed in New York's VIP West facility. So they have a facility that they're investigating. It is mainly empty. Detainees there, like Trump's former CFO Allen Weisselberg, 76, are typically given their own cells away from where other people are locked up. Another alternative, Bellevue Hospital prison ward. Okay, it's almost like they're enjoying themselves a little too much on this. So I don't want to get into this too deep because it's just kind of gross. It's like, well, who's reading this stuff? Like Andrew Weissman reads this before bedtime. The situation is further complicated by Trump's Secret Service protection. How are you going to do that? It's understood that chiefs are working on plans for how their agents will continue to protect him if he is in jail. Former presidents by law are entitled to round-the-clock security for the rest of their lives. And this is unless Congress passes the Disgrace Act by Benny Thompson, whereby they could then remove Secret Service protection for any elected official who has been convicted of a felony. They would just remove that, transfer custody of that person from the Secret Service to the jails for the duration of the incarceratory period, and then pull him back out, retransfer custody over to the Secret Service again. By law, former presidents entitled to law enforcement. A.T. Smith, a former deputy director of the U.S. Secret Service, said the reality of the job as an agent is not always completely pleasant. He revealed that agents they've spoken to have no emotion about the prospect of going to jail, whatever. All right, so that's an article from the Mirror. Now, we do have questions about what Congress is doing. What are some of the responses to the fact that they're trying to jail Trump? Congress, last week we saw Jim Jordan sent a letter over to Alvin Bragg and Matthew Colangelo, and he said, you guys better come over here and testify in front of Congress or sit down with us and have a meeting so we can dig into how this case came about and why it is happening in the first place. Alvin Bragg agreed to testify. This was a little curious because when we were reading through the letter last week, we were asking ourselves, another letter? Aren't we so sick of these letters because it's just one after another, round and around we go? But if a letter will instigate and initiate a response, if Alvin Bragg says, sure, we'll just come and testify, well, I guess the letter was successful then. But what is he going to say? Are we going to get anything meaningful out of it? The real next step is Congress to do something about this, to defund the federal funding of these various states with the power of the purse and use it like they've got a pair. But here's the story. Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan DA who prosecuted Trump, agreed on Friday to testify before Congress, so he's coming in. Bragg, who previously resisted congressional involvement, indicated his willingness to testify, said Congress wants to better understand the scope of the prosecution. Now, in addition, Jordan also leads the weaponization. He wants Colangelo, which is the Biden prosecutor. Bragg is just a figurehead, just like Tisch was when Colangelo worked over there. The office is committed to voluntary cooperation, which means he's going to provide testimony at an agreed upon date. So they'd much rather have Bragg testify than Colangelo. So Bragg just comes out and, I don't know, I wasn't involved in that. We have a great team of people who investigated that. That wasn't my decision. We make all our decisions based on probable cause, and he just deflects everything. Although Mr. Trump's 7-week trial is over, he's now the first president to become a felon. The trial courts and reviewing appellate courts have numerous orders for the purpose of protecting all of this, so Trump can appeal, and he's basically telling Congress, get out of our affairs. If Trump has a problem with this, he can take it up on appeal. Trump still has criminal cases in 3 other places as part of this onslaught. Looks like, Bragg will probably write a book about it. He'll be very excited. Yeah, you get to go testify in front of Congress. Great. The case stemmed from a hush money deal with Stormy, and they brought liar Michael Cohen out to testify about all this. So we have a lot of things that could happen. The Supreme Court could come out, grant immunity, and deal with a lot of this stuff very quickly. Trump was out over the weekend ripping on this lawfare, calling Jack Smith son of a B. So we got a content warning coming up. Earmuffs if you're worried about that, but you shouldn't be because it's epic. Here is Trump saying that Jack Smith is a real piece of work, and he did this in Vegas right over there. Here's the president.
How about this on the documents? They go after me for documents, and then they find out that Joe has 10 times the number of documents than me. I said, you have to be kidding. And they released him. I said, I don't want to be released like that. They released him on the basis that he's incompetent and he can't stand trial. I said, oh, I see. So he can't stand trial, so they're not going to charge him on 50 years worth of classified documents. He's incompetent. He won't have to stand trial, but he's allowed to run for president. So think of that. You have a guy that can't stand trial by the U.S. attorney, the man doing it, Mr. Hur. Now, I've never heard of this before because he wasn't incompetent. He was never smart, but he wasn't incompetent 10, 15, 20. This is 50 years for the documents. So he got off. In a sense, he got off. I said, I don't want to get off like that. I did nothing wrong. It's Presidential Records Act. I did nothing. We have a deranged individual named Jack Smith. He's a deranged, dumb guy. He's a dumb son of a bitch.
Yeah,
and
he is.
What he did, and I just want to get off normal. Can you imagine, sir, they're exonerating you. They consider you to be incompetent, and therefore, because you're incompetent, they're going to exonerate you. I said, I don't want that. Let me be guilty before they do that. But think of it. They say he's incompetent, and therefore he can't stand trial, but he can run for president. And this is what you're voting for. And I never talked about this guy like this, but you watched him yesterday, and he is so bad for this country. Everyone's laughing at him. The whole world is laughing, except for the fake news back there that try to pretend he did a good job because they're fake and dishonest.
Yeah, they love him. It's their hero. #1 candidate. They hate Trump so much, they're willing to just pick a demented man who has no control or faculties over our government at all to be their hero and savior. So Trump was out yesterday commenting on the classified documents case, and there was another exchange from last week that was involving Merrick Garland, who was asked about this, grilled over the Mar-a-Lago search. This was in Congress when Garland came out to testify about all this. So here's another exchange involving Jack Smith.
Current president.
Was there opposition in the Washington field office seeking a search warrant of Mar-a-Lago?
I'm hoping that there's always discussion in field offices about the appropriate approach.
Who gave the go-ahead?
I know that the reference to the special agent that was made earlier left out the conclusion of his transcript, which is he thought it was lawful.
Who gave the go-ahead to execute the search warrant on Mar-a-Lago?
Magistrate judge in the district,
Bruce
approved
Reinhardt.
the House and the Justice Department, as well as between the Congress and the Justice Department, to ensure that political considerations are not taken into consideration.
Yeah, right.
The principal bulwark of the rule of law is the career workforce of the department. The agents and the prosecutors prosecutors who do their jobs every day with only one purpose.
It's that stupid talking
to do
point.
the right thing in every case.
Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's what they say constantly. The hardworking men and women of the Justice Department. Give me a break. All right, so that's Garland, not answering any questions. The question that we have is, what is the Supreme Court going to say about this? We've got more decisions dropping this week. Immunity, abortion, other things. The clock is ticking on the summer recess. What is SCOTUS going to say about this, my friends? It's going to be very curious, because if SCOTUS comes out and they give us a broad immunity finding, meaning that Trump force field is very strong and it's very big, then we might lose the Florida case, the January 6th case. You can make the argument that the Fannie case does need to go, at least as relates to Trump. And then you also have, depending on how strong the immunity decision is, you could even theoretically backtrace that all the way back to the New York case, because he signed the checks in 2017 that he paid to Michael Cohen that are the subject of the false business records. So it's a pretty important thing that we're all waiting to see. What does SCOTUS say? SCOTUS and their term is winding down in the middle of a fraught election season. We got some pretty important things coming down the pike. We got presidential immunity is going to be a big one. The largest question is this: two federal cases, the J6 case and the Florida case, hanging in the balance, and the court appeared poised to grant Trump at least a partial victory during oral arguments. And we agree with that. We were thinking it's going to be significant. There were many questions there that I think support immunity. The question is to what extent. There is a force field. How strong is the force field, and how big is it? How expansive is it? Does it cover the whole building, or does it just cover your little head? So we got those coming up. Obstruction is going to be another big one. Court will also rule on whether they can use obstruction to charge January 6 people. Abortion's coming out, emergency abortion, federal agency power, gun rights, all this stuff coming out. And some of those opinions could drop even this week. So time will tell. Now, speaking of the New York case, we had Michael Cohen who was out there, and he's talking about this retribution. In our next segment, we're going to talk about AOC, who's petrified that Trump might win, and she's onto something because it's looking like he is. Here is Cohen saying, if Trump wins, we're going to get thrown out of windows or something.
First of all of these people, whether it's Marco Rubio, Mike Johnson, Mark Meadows, have all said disparaging things at one point in time about Donald. Ted Cruz, the same thing. They believe that if Donald Trump wins and they are shoulder to shoulder with him, that they will have unlimited power, which would, of course, give them the ability to make or to have unlimited resources and assets. One mistake that they are making, Donald Trump doesn't share. It's all about him, not about his kids, not about his family. It is all about him.
He's running for the country.
They're going to hit.
He's running for president on behalf of the country.
Push themselves to his wagon in hopes that they're going to elevate themselves, whether it's through power, through money.
He's being prosecuted in 4 different jurisdictions. Is that for him? Is that a benefit to him? Is that making him stronger?
With connections and so on. It doesn't work that way. He will not allow them. And just like Putin, once you start to get too big for your own britches, people will start flying out of windows. They will start like Navalny. They will end up in...
They're going to be poisoned.
Gulags. They will end up, as Donald says all the time, send them to Gitmo. Send them to Guantanamo Bay.
And by the way, so he's just going to play patty cake with him again. Wow. Okay, so they brought out Putin, Gitmo, talking about the gulags. He didn't mention the J6ers at all. He didn't mention the multiple political prosecutions that his side is engaged in. Okay, if Putin does political prosecutions, that's great. Trump never did any. He didn't prosecute Hillary Clinton. Maybe he should have. He didn't. So very curious how they continue to blame the other side for things that they do. Now, Trump, as we see, is continuing to gain momentum, even in Newport Beach. Here is what Breitbart's reporting for us. Look at this enthusiasm for Trump out there in the state of California. That's a blue state, if we forgot. President Trump greeted by very large crowds, even in Newport Beach, California. There was a rally hosted by John Word, his wife. Tickets were $6,600 a couple, photo $35,000, and raising $75,000, $100,000 per person for various events. You can see this is what it looks like out there. No wonder Cohen's upset. No one looks like that for Biden. looking pretty good. So the energy continues out there. Trump is causing a lot of energy reminiscent of what we saw in 2016. In 2020, they put the boot on everybody's neck with COVID and the fear porn, that death counter scoreboard every day. They wanted to disincentivize people from going out voting in public, and it may have worked in addition to all of the other manipulations they created back in 2020. But now we see energy, we see enthusiasm, we see these campaign rallies, we see not even rallies, we see people assembling their boats all over the place. It doesn't surprise me Cohen's freaked out. The other person who is freaked out about this, AOC. And so we're talking about AOC and the rest of the Democrats being worried about going in jail, being thrown in jail if Trump wins. And we'll talk about that in our next segment. We'll see you over there.